important. I said this through the process of finding the right job. You know, you're looking closely at the obstacles within each organization, and I felt like Greg and Kerry, the Walton Penner ownership group, this was unique. I met with them first. I would say it was really productive, and then as the process, the one thing we couldn't control obviously is the compensation relative to a trade, but ultimately it was the most important thing for me was finding an ownership group was committed to winning and having a first-class organization, and I know I found that.
Sean, Greg said at the end of the season.
Greg
Penner said at the end of the season that they were going to be doing a really deep dive into the injuries that happened. As you come in and kind of take a look at that with him, what's the biggest change that you see in order to help?
Well, I don't know that there's one bullet point. There's probably a series of things. Typically, when you have a season that went like it did last year, there's a lot of people with dirt on their hands. Not just one thing, you know. Bo Lowry, we hired. I've worked with Bo. He's outstanding. He'll head up the training room, strength, sports, science, all of that, and he's someone that is outstanding. It's hard in our league. I would say the training room is one of those rooms where it's hard. The grass is always greener, right? You know, you don't. And for a period of 5, 6, 7 years there, I watched it flip with him and the trust with the players and getting treatment. So this last off season, Drew had a shoulder procedure done, separate from football. When the surgery was finished, he flew to Baton Rouge to have Bo and his group work on it. And so, you know, that's something you earn with your players. And he's got an amazing way about him, and he's also very well respected where he did his fellow. You know, the doctors that he's worked with, we're lucky to have him. So that's just only one element, I think, of your question. You know, I can't look back and say, all right, this is why all these different things happen. But I do know we're playing tackle football, and you have to practice tackle football. And
What happened to him?
A lot of your signings were special teams backgrounds. So how important has that phase been in what you've been doing the last couple of weeks and what you want to do to get this thing going?
I think it's awfully important. I think it's one way to improve your team pretty quickly. I don't think we were very good last year in the kicking game, quite honestly, for a number of reasons. You know, I've got a guy like Ben Kotwika and a guy like Mike Westhoff. Those are considerable resources that I think can help us. And so it would be silly to have those two along with Chris Banjo and then not have a punter or not have the correct holder or even a returner that we're still working on. So it's got to be an important point of emphasis. And obviously, if you believe in hidden yardage and you understand yards equal points, each play you're fighting for those yards. So that's an area that we felt like we needed to improve dramatically.
After meeting with potential Commanders owners, have you had a conversation with the owner there at all? And is it an awkward position to be in a coach, to be courted for a position that a coach already has a job?
No, none of that. All of that, I think, was blown a little bit out of proportion, but Ron and I are good friends.
Sean, I want to ask you one about Dan Campbell real quick. Obviously, he speaks very highly of you. What is it that you saw in Dan initially that made you think, you know, he's...
So Dan and I were in New York together. We drafted him. I was one of the coaches. I was the offensive coordinator, and then when I got to Dallas, we signed Dan. Parcells asked me, you know, is this a guy we want? And so we brought Dan to Dallas, and then when his career was finished, spent a number of years trying to hire him. It's kind of difficult to get a coach who's under contract, and I was finally able to do that. He's smart, he's tough, he's passionate. I think we're in the passion business, and certainly Dan is. He's a tremendous teacher. And he's someone that communicates extremely well with his players, like extremely well. And sometimes it's not what they want to hear, but I think they appreciate that, and it's really good to see him doing well. I felt like we watched like some of the toughest games for Detroit there for a stretch, and it was great to see like that turn. And I mean, we've seen a 60-some yard field goal bounce off the crossbar. And, I mean, you lose track of the different ways, but he epitomizes grit, toughness.
As you've got some of your offensive linemen in place now with free agency, what do you make of your center position? Do you like Lloyd there? What do you think of him as a player as you've gone back and looked?
Yeah, look, we felt like it was an area we needed to address. We feel like he's really going to benefit from these additions. We haven't met any of these guys yet, so, but we see him as our starting center. Yeah.
Can you give us an update on KJ Hamler and where things stand?
No, listen, he had an injury that took place while he was training. He had a surgery done. He's rehabbing right now.
How's Russell Wilson doing with the knee procedure he had, and will he participate in that voluntary
Yeah.
mini camp you guys are having in April? Or?
We're not having a voluntary mini camp in April. I know the camp you're referencing. No, it was on the league schedule, not our schedule. All right. And then injury-wise, I'll keep you posted. That's something, we're not going to talk a lot about, probably ever.
Jared Stidham, like pretty early on, what is it that you like about him?
I think he's young, but I think he's someone that we had a good grade on coming out. We like the player. I think he played well in the two starts he had this year. If you study closely the San Francisco game, he's smart at the line of scrimmage. And so there were a couple of directions really with that position. There were a handful of number twos that either I'd worked with or we felt comfortable with. But in this case, I think it's a number two that his arrow is moving in a direction where, we feel like he can become an NFL starter in our league. Now, so the evaluation was pretty crystal clear for all of us. I think he's someone that's going to be great in the room. He's smart. And so quietly, that was an important sign for us.
What led you to Zach Allen? You had the chance with Draymond Jones. There was interest here.
There was interest early in the season. I guess during the year there was an offer made. Look, in the end, it's pretty difficult. It's a week before prom, and you're trying to figure out if Sally Sue's going to go with you. If not, you have to have. And so this goes back and forth. I'm happy that Draymond found a great spot. We felt like we found obviously one of the must was Draymond and/or that position, and we didn't feel like it was deep.
What did you like about Zach?
Effort, energy. We loved how he improved in this past season. Obviously, Vance has been with him, so when you're in free agency and you have a little bit more intimate knowledge with a player, it's important. It's really important.
How are your conversations with Vance? I know you probably spend a little more time with George than Vance these days. But just...
They've been good.
Sean McVay at the end of the last season took some time to think about whether he wanted to coach this year. When you went through your decision about not coming back last year, what were you hoping to get from your time away from coaching?
I think it's probably different for everyone. For me, it was a couple things. Spending more time with my children. Rest. We traveled some. It's hard because you get in a routine, you go and you go and you go, and then when the season winds down, if the losses are beginning to sting more than the wins feel good, then you know that that's not a good thing. I said this when I stepped away in New Orleans, though. I knew it wasn't like this wasn't forever. I said, now did I know it would be a year? Was it going to be 2 years? You know, I didn't know at that time. But for me, it was a chance to kind of reset and then have a chance to work on the other side of it in your field with the networks, and it was good. I enjoyed it.
How'd you know you were ready to come back?
I probably knew I was ready to come back middle of the season. I think it was, all right, there was enough of this quiet time. You know, we're kind of conditioned with itineraries and schedules, and when all of that stops, there's a little bit of void. But I played plenty of golf, and I knew I wanted to come back this season.
Sean, what's your philosophy on the run game and how important it is to emphasize that to have a successful offense?
I'm in favor of it.
Was that a priority in
Yes.
free agency?
Yeah.
Did we
Yes.
do anything here to get to know everybody, hang out at the pool, team dinner, function, get to know the ownership group while you're here? Anything?
Our ownership group? Yeah. But that would be for us, you know, I'm not going to go through our itinerary with the Penners.
But in general, when you're back at whether it's Super Bowl doing stuff, combine, and now here, do you feel a renewed enthusiasm?
Yeah.
after 10 years?
Yeah. Look, I've done this a long time, and I know a lot of the people, the coaches, a lot of the owners, not just our own ownership group, many of the other owners, some of which I've worked for, and some I've just known for 16 years as a head coach and 22 years total. So it's good to be back and see, and not just it's everyone. It's not the circus, but it's the same group of people you see at the combine for the most part. A little bit different. Owners meetings. We'll have a draft, and it's good to see those people, and good to see a lot of the media people that I've worked with before. Some of you, this is the first time, and all good.
Bringing Joe Vitt back.
Excuse me, Coach.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did a pretty good job with our staff, you can think of diversity in a lot of different ways, and we've certainly, I think, done a great job there. But there's also a good mix of younger coaches and veteran coaches that I think are important. We're excited about that. And then from a personality standpoint, I think that's also important. You know, what the roles are. I think it's important the roles are defined clearly. He's a tremendous communicator with players. Probably the most important hire I made in New Orleans back in '06, and he'll be a good asset for our team.
You said you're not going to do the voluntary camp. But
Yeah, I saw where that was printed. We're going right to phase 1 for a month. We're just going to lift and run. I don't know where that came from.
as you went through the year off, did you restructure anything about how you sort of envision an offseason, or is it pretty much like you did?
No, we've done that before in New Orleans. Just tried to extend. There's a progression, I think, when you train athletes, and I think we're too quick to move out of phase 1 into football after 3 weeks of lifting and running, and that's not enough time.
Sean, I know you hit the ground.
What separated Ben Powers and Michael McNeish from other free agent possibilities that might be?
Good question. Look, I think you evaluate these players and you look at all the tape, and then you look at the makeup and the intelligence, and we felt like they were really good fits for what we want to do. There was a consistency, that you saw, that you felt like you were getting each week. Health, makeup, all of that gets factored in.
With Sean,
Does he run more than a third down guy, or how do you see some?
I see position flex. I mean, if you really watch P. Ryan, study the tape, you see him on early downs, you see him playing third down. He's a really good receiver, and obviously he can block the blitz. He's big, he's physical, he's smart, he's tough. He's kind of built to last, and so that was an important piece for us, knowing the injury that we're dealing with, and so he was really important.
Is Latavius still in the mix?
We'll see.
Sean, I know you've hit the ground running, but have you had a chance much to get out in the Denver community and kind of see the passion of the Broncos fans or anything like that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
When you were kicking the tires on this job, was there anything you heard about Russell or from people when you were asking the
I've worked with Russell. I was at the Pro Bowl in Florida years ago. Coached him. Shoot, we played two or three different playoff games against him. I was very familiar with.
What stood out to you that you felt you could work
Well,
with?
look, he's super competitive. He's won at a high level. He's someone that I think moves well. He's someone that I think works extremely hard. It's hard to find guys with all those traits. Now, I watched with every one of you the season that took place a year ago, and I said this a little bit earlier, there's probably a little bit of dirt on a lot of people's hands. And when you win 5 games, it is what it is. And I don't think I need to elaborate any more. I mean, it wasn't good. Wasn't good on offense, that's for sure. And it was hard film to watch.
Coach, what makes do you believe in the idea of a young team or guys that haven't won before kind of learning how to win? Is that something you buy into, or is that kind of a media thing that people come up with?
Oh, I don't know that I've ever looked at the age of the team and said, I mean, I think you're bringing, it's a young man's game, and I think, the vision for the veteran player, I don't need to see it every day, but I still need to see it from a veteran. I think it's more about the makeup than the age, if that makes sense. That's how I look at it. And then someone will tell me this is your average age, and I'll be like, oh, okay. It's not the other way around. And so, but the makeup and all these critical factors that we think are important, those are thought about when the player's coming in. We're certainly aware of their age. In free agency, you're signing maybe at 2 or 3 priority positions that are younger on their first or second contract. But occasionally you'll bring in a veteran player, and you've got a pretty clean vision for what you're wanting in the player.
What did you think of Dulcich when you saw what he did as a rookie, or what's the next step for him in his game?
Yeah, we'll see. Look, we haven't gone through every player relative to the evaluation process, but some of it was hard, the evaluation. Some of it was hard. Pardon? Yeah, I'm not going to talk about, yeah. What I said is I think there's upside in this player. So here we are, we have a young player. I think there's certain players that we saw in free agency, there are 2. And can they come in and play and start? Yes. I think you get that with Jared, but I also think you get a player who's still ascending. I mean, if you watch the 49er game, have you seen that game? That's impressive against a good defense. And so he was a priority for us, like quietly. And fortunately, it worked out where we were able to get him.
What was that a Davis Webb connection too?
I don't think he was jettisoned, though. I think there was a clear vision and intention for Las Vegas to re-sign him. So no one was jettisoned.
What was your process during the season of earmarking players that you liked for potentially your next job?
I don't think I was doing that. I mean, I was worried about pronouncing their names right on national TV. I wasn't looking at putting together a list. I would say at a certain point I began to look at, all right, what kind of staff flexibility might I have relative to whose contract might be up, and can I hire this coach or that coach? Because that is a little bit more challenging than the other.
What makes Zach a good addition to you, Zach Streif, when he goes those 6 guys?
Yeah, so Zach obviously, played for us and then coached for me. He's one of the few players, former players, that moved from playing and went into the play-by-play booth, not the color booth. And so all of us were like, but none of us were surprised that, pretty soon he did it pretty well. I was calling him about a coach when I was in New Orleans, and he told me what I wanted to hear, and I was hiring a line coach, and then I was going to hire an assistant line coach, and the next day he called me back and said, "Hey, I'd be interested in the assistant line job," and I'm like, "Well, I thought you were a play-by-play guy." He said, "I want to be a line coach." I said, "All right, come in tomorrow," and so I hired him the next day. There's certain people you get to come across in your lifetime that you just know are achievers, and that whatever it is that they don't know, they'll figure out quickly and be successful. He's one of those people. Now, it just so happens to be he had a long career playing offensive line, and so I know he continued coaching that position last year. But to your question earlier, he was a target. Wherever I went, I wanted to, if I was able to, hire him as the line coach. And so you guys will enjoy getting to know him. He's a pretty special person.
Was he somebody who you figured was going to be a good coach while he was on your team?
Well, look, I talk about bloodlines a lot. So his former head coach, the late Randy Walker, I coached under at Miami of Ohio. And Zach was from Cincinnati, and Randy had gone to Northwestern and recruited and signed Zach at Northwestern. My first year in New Orleans, I called Randy on a quarterback that he had. Now, you have to know Randy Walker. He didn't pass out many compliments. It was like they were hard-earned. And we finished with the quarterback, and he said, "What do you think of my right tackle?" And I didn't know who his right tackle was, right? I said, "Who's your right tackle?" And he said, and he yelled at me like I should have known, and I probably should have. Zach Streif, and he goes, "This kid can play in your league. If Trey Essex can play in your league," he goes, "Streif can play in your league." He was a 2-time captain. So when I hung up the phone, and I knew it didn't come from Randy that often, I walked into the draft room, and I saw he was on the backboard of free agents. And I grabbed his magnet, and we walked it over, and I put it in the 6th round. So that year in the 7th round, we took Zach Streif first with our first 7th round pick, and Marcus Colston with our compensatory 7th. Those guys played like 25 years. So that was a good phone conversation. But back to the pedigree, I just know how he's been coached. Well, there's not another person that I know more on our staff and team than Zach Streif. So that's an easy one.
Hard to pull him away from the brewery then?
Yeah, I think it's good for him to be away from breweries.
Well, then Colorado may not be the best one to handle it. Why was Alex Singleton a priority?
Look, he was productive. I thought there were a lot of things we did well defensively, and if he wasn't, then where were we going if not Alex? And so the mistake sometimes, we didn't take that at all for granted, like, oh, he's just going to return. Like, there was a lot that went into that. And so those 2 inside guys played well, and they were available, and the defense in a lot of ways played well, considering the time of possession, considering the field position, considering, like, it's hard to play good defense if you're not playing complementary football. And it sounds like I'm being critical of the special teams and the offense, and I am.
What can you say about the signing of Zach Allen? A lot of people have claimed that.
A lot of people have what?
Zach Allen. A lot of people have spoken well of that signing.
Yeah,